There are moments when abundance does not respond to effort, strategy, or struggle. It responds to remembrance. What I am about to share with you is not a ritual of superstition, nor a promise of instant wealth. It is an ancient spiritual principle preserved within Jewish wisdom, passed quietly through generations, who understood something modern life has forgotten. Money flows where spiritual order is restored. Before we go any further, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, Jewish Kabbalah. By subscribing, you are supporting the preservation of ancient teachings that were never meant to be loud, commercial, or distorted, only lived and transmitted with responsibility. Now pause for a moment, breathe, and write this affirmation in the comments. I honor the roots that sustain my life. Writing is not symbolic. In Jewish thought, writing establishes agreement. From the earliest chapters of Genesis, blessing is never disconnected from lineage. Who you come from matters spiritually, not as fate, but as channel. Yet most people try to fix financial flow only at the surface. Income, effort, opportunity, while ignoring the deeper currents beneath their lives. Tonight's teaching touches one of those currents. In this chapter, I will not yet explain why the maternal grandmother holds such power in spiritual economics. Wisdom unfolds by preparation, not by haste. What I will tell you is this: when the maternal line is honored, resistance in provision often softens. Not magically, but structurally. And structure precedes flow. To understand why the maternal grandmother holds such a decisive role in the flow of provision, one must step outside modern assumptions and enter the ancient Jewish understanding of lineage, transmission, and spiritual structure. In the Torah and in Kabbalistic thought, lineage is never treated as a biological coincidence. It is seen as a channel through which spiritual patterns, capacities, and limitations travel across generations. Jewish identity itself flows through the mother. This is not a cultural preference, nor a social construct. It is a metaphysical principle. The sages explain that the maternal line carries the power of formation. It is within the mother that life is shaped, sustained, and brought into manifestation. The father may initiate, but the mother contains, develops, and reveals. Containment is not passive. It is creative power in its most refined form. Kabbalah identifies this principle with the concept of Malkut, the sephira associated with manifestation, receptivity, and material expression. Malkut does not generate energy on its own. It receives, holds, and translates higher forces into lived reality. Without Malkut, abundance exists only in potential. It never becomes tangible. The maternal grandmother represents the root of this vessel. She is the first embodied point of containment in your direct spiritual line. Before your mother carried you, she was shaped within her mother. This is not symbolic language. It is spiritual architecture. The patterns of reception, security, lack, trust, and provision are often transmitted silently through this line, not as conscious teaching, but as lived experience embedded into the soul. Ancient Jewish wisdom teaches that money is not merely currency, it is movement. It is flow. And flow depends on openness, trust, and the ability to receive. Many people struggle financially not because they lack skill or effort, but because their inner vessel resists reception. They push, chase, and strain, yet remain blocked at the level of allowance. The maternal line is where this resistance often originates. If the women in the lineage carried fear around provision, scarcity consciousness, or silent anxiety, those patterns imprint themselves subtly on the descendants. Not as a curse, but as an inherited posture toward life. The Torah repeatedly emphasizes that the sins or merits of generations echo forward, not as punishment, but as momentum. Writing the name of the maternal grandmother before sleep is a way of bringing this hidden momentum into awareness. It is not an attempt to control the past. It is an act of recognition. In Jewish thought, recognition precedes rectification. What is acknowledged can be healed. What remains unconscious continues to govern silently. Sleep is a critical element in this practice. During sleep, the rational mind releases its grip. The soul enters a state of receptivity, similar to the original state of creation. This is why dreams carry symbolic truth. This is why Jacob's ladder appears at night. This is why King Solomon receives wisdom while sleeping. Night is when resistance softens. By writing the name before sleep, the individual places intention into the subconscious. The act is simple, but its meaning is layered. It says, I recognize the channel through which my ability to receive was formed. I honor it. I do not reject it. I do not fight it. I bring it into alignment. The name itself matters because, in Hebrew, understanding, A name contains essence. Even when written in another language, the intention directs the soul toward the root. The sages teach that intention elevates action. Without intention, action is empty. With intention, even simple acts become transformative. This practice is not about blaming ancestors. Jewish wisdom never encourages resentment toward lineage. On the contrary, it teaches gratitude and responsibility. Each generation receives what the previous one could not complete, and is given the opportunity to refine it further. This is not burden, it is trust. Money begins to flow, not because the act is magical, but because inner resistance begins to dissolve. When the vessel relaxes, flow follows. When the soul stops rejecting reception, provision finds pathways that were previously blocked by fear, guilt, or unconscious loyalty to struggle. The maternal grandmother symbolizes the deepest layer of permission. Many people unconsciously feel that ease is disloyal to those who struggled before them. They sabotage flow out of misplaced loyalty. This ancient practice gently releases that loyalty and replaces it with continuity rather than repetition. In Kabbalistic language, this is called tikkun rectification. Not destruction of the past, but its elevation. Writing the name is a way of saying, I carry forward what was given to me, but I allow it to evolve. The elders taught that when the maternal line is honored, stability enters financial life. Not sudden riches, but consistency. Not spectacle, but sufficiency with peace. Over time, this stability creates opportunity, clarity, and growth. Money stops being a source of anxiety and becomes a tool for stewardship. This is why the phrase money begins to flow naturally is precise. Natural flow is not forced. It is not chased. It moves according to alignment. Rivers do not push water uphill. They follow structure. When the channel is clear, movement happens effortlessly. This ancient understanding stands in sharp contrast to modern obsession with hustle and pressure. Jewish wisdom never glorified exhaustion. It glorified order. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. Effort balanced by reception. Action grounded in trust. The maternal grandmother's name represents that trust. It represents the capacity to receive without guilt, to hold without fear, and to allow abundance to pass through without clinging. This is the revelation at the heart of the teaching. Money does not flow because the world changes overnight. It flows because the inner world stops resisting it. And when resistance ends, alignment begins to work quietly, patiently, and faithfully over time. This wisdom has survived not because it promises spectacle, but because it produces coherence. And coherence, in the end, is what allows abundance to remain instead of disappear. The practice is simple. The implications are profound. And what has been preserved for generations was never meant to remain hidden, only to be approached with humility, patience, and respect for the depth of the channel it touches. Ancient Jewish wisdom teaches that abundance is not attracted by force, desire, or urgency, but by readiness. Readiness is not a condition of the external world. It is a condition of the inner vessel. When the vessel is tense, fearful, or conflicted, even blessing cannot remain. It may arrive briefly, but it will not settle. This is why many people experience moments of financial opportunity that dissolve just as quickly as they appear. The practice of writing the maternal grandmother's name before sleep addresses this exact point. It does not aim at money directly. It aims at the capacity to receive without inner resistance. In Jewish thought, reception is not weakness. It is the final and most delicate stage of creation. What cannot receive cannot sustain life. Throughout the Torah, the greatest failures of abundance are not caused by lack of provision, but by inability to hold it. The wilderness generation receives manna daily, yet remains anxious. Kings receive wealth, yet fall into corruption. The problem is never supply. The problem is vessel integrity. The maternal line, according to Kabbalah, shapes the earliest experience of safety, trust, and allowance. Before a child understands language, it understands containment. Before it understands effort, it understands reception. These early imprints remain active far longer than most people realize. They quietly inform how one relates to money, opportunity, rest, and success. When a person writes the name of the maternal grandmother before sleep, they are not invoking her authority. They are acknowledging the channel through which their relationship with reception was first modeled. This acknowledgement softens unconscious defenses. It says to the soul, I am allowed to receive without fear. I am allowed to have without guilt. I am allowed to live without constant struggle. Sleep is the ideal moment for this practice because it bypasses the rational mind's objections. During the day, the ego argues. It justifies tension. It clings to familiar patterns, even painful ones, because familiarity feels safer than change. At night, these defenses weaken. The soul becomes receptive again, closer to its original state. Jewish mysticism teaches that during sleep, the soul partially ascends. It reviews, releases, and reorganizes. This is why bedtime intention matters. What is placed before sleep often becomes integrated far more deeply than what is repeated during waking hours. Writing the name at this moment creates a bridge between consciousness and subconscious alignment. The act itself is simple, but its effect is cumulative. Over time, something subtle begins to shift. Financial decisions become calmer. Impulsive spending loses appeal. Desperation fades. Trust begins to replace tension. This does not mean effort disappears. Jewish wisdom never promotes passivity. Work remains sacred. Action remains necessary. But the quality of effort changes. It becomes grounded rather than frantic, focused rather than scattered, consistent rather than explosive. Many people sabotage their own financial flow because they are unknowingly loyal to patterns of struggle inherited from the past. They believe, often unconsciously, that ease would dishonor the sacrifices of those who came before them. This belief creates internal contradiction. The person desires abundance, but rejects it emotionally the moment it arrives. By honoring the maternal grandmother, this contradiction begins to dissolve. The practice reframes legacy. It says, I do not repeat struggle to honor my lineage. I refine it. I allow what was endured to become wisdom, not limitation. In Jewish thought, this is the essence of tikkun. Rectification does not erase the past. It redeems it. It takes what was broken and allows it to serve a higher function. The maternal line is not blamed. It is elevated. As this inner reconciliation occurs, money begins to move differently. Not dramatically, but steadily. Opportunities appear that feel aligned rather than forced. Resources arrive without the same emotional charge. Money stops being a measure of worth and becomes a tool of stewardship. This is what it means for money to flow naturally. Natural flow does not shock the system. It integrates. It does not destabilize identity. It supports it. Many people fear abundance because they have seen it destroy character. Jewish wisdom teaches that abundance only destroys what is already unstable. When the vessel is healed, flow becomes safe. The written name becomes a quiet witness to this process. It does not demand attention. It does not need to be touched constantly. Its presence alone reinforces intention. Each night, the act repeats. Acknowledgement, alignment, release. Over time, the nervous system responds. Anxiety decreases. The constant sense of urgency softens. This is not psychological suggestion alone. It is spiritual reorientation. The soul stops bracing for loss and begins to trust continuity. Jewish sages often taught that wealth follows peace, not the other way around. When inner conflict resolves, outer movement follows. This is why so many teachings focus not on acquiring, but on ordering the heart. As the practice continues, the person may notice that money-related conversations change. Fear-driven decisions lose dominance. Generosity becomes easier. Boundaries become clearer. These are signs that the vessel is stabilizing. The maternal grandmother's name acts as a symbol of permission. Permission to receive without shame. Permission to prosper without abandoning values. Permission to live well without disconnecting from spiritual responsibility. This permission is what many people lack. They work tirelessly, but never feel allowed to rest. They earn, but never feel secure. They achieve, but never feel satisfied. The issue is not external success. It is internal allowance. The practice addresses this at its root. Over months and years, those who live with this awareness often look back and realize that money no longer governs their emotional state. It serves its purpose without dominating identity. This is the highest form of financial freedom in Jewish wisdom. Not abundance that impresses others, but abundance that sustains life with dignity, peace, and continuity. This is how ancient teachings survive. Not because they promise quick results, but because they produce lives that remain whole over time. There is a hidden layer to financial struggle that most people never confront. It is not visible on bank statements, contracts, or income charts. It lives deeper, in memory. Not personal memory alone, but inherited memory. Jewish wisdom teaches that what is not healed in one generation often returns disguised in the next, asking not to be repeated, but to be understood. The maternal line carries this memory with particular intensity, not because women are weaker, but because they are closer to the core of survival, nurture, and continuity. The fears a grandmother carried during pregnancy, scarcity she endured silently, sacrifices she normalized, and anxieties she never verbalized, did not disappear when her life ended. They settled into patterns, tones, and emotional reflexes that quietly shaped the next generation. This does not mean that suffering is destiny. Jewish tradition strongly rejects fatalism. It teaches responsibility, not resignation. But responsibility begins with recognition. What remains unacknowledged continues to operate beneath awareness, shaping reactions long before conscious choice enters. Many people experience financial tension that feels disproportionate to their circumstances. They may earn well, yet feel unsafe. They may receive opportunities, yet hesitate to trust them. They may save, yet fear loss constantly. These responses are often inherited, not chosen. They are echoes of a time when lack was real, dangerous, and unavoidable. The practice of writing the maternal grandmother's name before sleep touches this exact layer. It brings inherited memory into gentle awareness, not to relive pain, but to release it. The act says to the soul, I see where this fear came from. I honor its origin, and I no longer need to live inside it. Jewish mysticism teaches that fear, when respected, can be transformed into wisdom. Fear, when denied, becomes control. Many people try to control money because they do not trust it. They track obsessively, hoard unnecessarily, or chase relentlessly. Control is often misinterpreted as responsibility, but in truth, it is usually fear, wearing a disciplined mask. The maternal grandmother represents the first point where survival instincts were formed in your lineage. By acknowledging her name, you are not blaming her. You are honoring her endurance, while releasing the burden of repeating her struggle. This distinction is essential. Jewish wisdom never promotes rejection of ancestors. It promotes elevation of their experience. This is why the act is done quietly, before sleep, without explanation to others. It is intimate work, sacred work. It is not meant to be discussed casually or displayed publicly. What is healed in silence often remains stable longer than what is announced loudly. As this healing begins, emotional reactions around money start to shift. The body responds before the mind understands. Tension decreases. Breathing becomes deeper. Decisions feel less urgent. The nervous system stops treating every financial moment as a threat. This shift has profound implications. When fear loosens its grip, creativity awakens. When survival mode deactivates, perception expands. Opportunities that were previously invisible become obvious. This is not because the world changed, but because awareness did. Jewish sages taught that poverty is not only lack of money, it is constriction of consciousness. Wealth, in its truest sense, is spaciousness of soul. The ability to respond rather than react. The capacity to plan without panic. The strength to give without fear of disappearance. This is the wealth the practice cultivates first. Material flow follows later, as a consequence rather than a pursuit. There is an old teaching that says blessing does not rest where there is anxiety. It visits, but it does not stay. When the vessel trembles, flow becomes unstable. The healing of inherited fear creates a vessel that can hold abundance without being overwhelmed by it. This is why many people receive money only to lose it. The vessel was not prepared. It cracked under pressure. The practice of honoring the maternal line repairs the vessel slowly, patiently, over time. Healing memory is not dramatic. It does not arrive with fireworks. It feels almost boring at first. Subtle. Uneventful. This is how deep transformation works. It integrates rather than disrupts. Over months of consistent intention, the person begins to notice patterns dissolving. Financial emergencies become less frequent. Decisions improve. Relationships around money stabilize. These changes often occur without conscious effort, which is why they are frequently dismissed as coincidence. Jewish wisdom does not dismiss coincidence lightly. It understands alignment. When alignment is restored, the past stops interfering with the present. Legacy becomes resource instead of restraint. The strength of those who endured becomes fuel for those who continue, rather than a chain that binds them to repetition. The maternal grandmother's name becomes a bridge between generations. It allows gratitude to replace guilt, continuity to replace conflict, blessing to replace survival-driven tension. This is the emotional core of the teaching. Money begins to flow, not because something was summoned, but because something was released. What was released was not money itself, but fear around it. When fear dissolves, flow follows. And when flow follows, life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a journey guided by quiet trust. There comes a moment when a teaching stops feeling new and starts feeling true. It is no longer something you think about. It becomes something you live from. This is the moment ancient Jewish wisdom has always aimed for. Not inspiration that fades, but orientation that remains. When the maternal line is honored, when inherited fear loosens its grip, and when the inner vessel learns to receive without resistance, something fundamental changes in the way life is experienced. Money is no longer approached as a threat to be controlled or a prize to be chased. It becomes movement. It becomes participation in a larger rhythm of giving and receiving. This is why the sages never separated spiritual alignment from material stability. In Jewish thought, separation itself is the problem. Heaven and earth are not enemies. Spirit and matter are not rivals. One reveals itself through the other. When inner order is restored, outer order follows naturally. The practice you have encountered is simple by design. Simplicity allows continuity. What is complicated requires constant motivation. What is simple becomes habit. And habit, when aligned with wisdom, reshapes destiny quietly, without spectacle. Writing the maternal grandmother's name before sleep is not meant to occupy your attention forever. Over time, it recedes into the background, yet its effect continues. The goal was never the act itself. The goal was the inner permission it cultivates. Permission to receive. Permission to rest. Permission to live without chronic fear of loss. This permission changes how a person wakes up in the morning. There is less urgency, less comparison, less internal pressure to prove worth through exhaustion. Decisions become less reactive and more intentional. Work becomes cleaner. Effort becomes focused. Waste of energy diminishes. Jewish wisdom teaches that energy leaks through inner contradiction. When a person wants abundance but fears it, desires stability but mistrusts it, seeks peace but clings to struggle, energy is constantly divided. The practice resolves this contradiction at its root. It allows desire and trust to move in the same direction. As this coherence deepens, money responds differently. Not dramatically, but faithfully. Income becomes steadier. Opportunities align more consistently. Losses, when they occur, are absorbed without devastation. Recovery becomes faster. Confidence grows, not from arrogance, but from grounded experience. This is the meaning behind the phrase, money begins to flow naturally. Natural flow does not overwhelm. It supports. It integrates into life, rather than disrupting it. It allows generosity without fear and boundaries without guilt. Over years, this way of living produces something more valuable than wealth alone. It produces dignity. The dignity of not being ruled by panic. The dignity of not needing to impress. The dignity of knowing that provision is not an accident, but a relationship cultivated through alignment. The elders spoke of thanking heaven later in life because they understood something few understand when young. What matters most is not how fast you rise, but how steadily you remain. A life that collapses under its own success is not considered blessed. A life that endures with coherence is. This teaching was preserved because it works across time. It does not depend on economy, culture, or trend. It depends on structure, and structure outlasts circumstances. If you feel that this wisdom speaks to something deeper than technique, if you sense that it touches layers of life you have struggled to articulate, that recognition itself is meaningful. Jewish tradition teaches that, when the heart recognizes truth, it is because the soul remembers it. There are further layers to this wisdom that cannot be fully explored in a single teaching. Understanding how lineage, language, intention, and daily practice interweave requires careful guidance and context. That is why the Jewish Wisdom eBook exists. It was created to accompany those who wish to go beyond a moment of insight and build a life rooted in ancient clarity. If you feel genuine interest in going deeper, ask for the Jewish Wisdom eBook in the comments. This invitation is not about urgency. It is about readiness. Those who are meant to explore further will feel it quietly. As this teaching comes to rest, carry this final reflection with you. When fear releases its grip, flow does not rush, it arrives. When alignment replaces tension, life no longer resists itself. And when remembrance guides the heart, abundance becomes not a chase, but a companion along the journey. May what you honor tonight shape not only tomorrow, but the years ahead.